Hi, I'm Terra Gold. You're joining me at home. At home refers to being at home within oneself, within the world, and at home with spirit. This podcast is raw and it's real. It's sometimes panel style, and it's always shared in a conversational style. Join me here for holistic lifestyle tips that really make a difference with scholars, medical professionals, scientists, cultural creatives, and artists that share through their lens. What all these conversations have in common is that we're all dedicated to empowering and inspiring each other to cultivate inner wisdom and also to share it. Welcome home. We were right home from the start. Before we started, we were reviewing that we talked about doing this last year, April of last year.
Oh, yeah.
So sometimes in
It's
life,
been a year.
it's been a year. So
Wow.
I want to start with something with you, Karlton, where can I share your bio first?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So Karlton Terry, also known as KT, is one of the most recognized educators and practitioners of the Pre and Peri-natal Sciences. His work with babies, children, and adults pursues the goal of illuminating implicit memories to enable liberation from debilitating hostage-taking patterns held in the brain and throughout the body. Recognizing the circumstances and consequences of our early injuries is a first step along the pathway toward renewed positive human experience. And even as adults, we can permanently change ingrained self-disabling behavior patterns and belief systems by dealing with our prenatal and birth journeys.
Mm-hmm.
So that's written by you, I believe, yes?
Well, I'm sure it had something to do with it.
and then early in your career, you became interested in the healing arts and developed a naturopathic healing center. You had over 60 practitioners in Denver, Colorado. You became a pre and perinatal workshop leader after working for many years with Dr. William Emerson.
Mm-hmm.
And for almost 30 years, you've taught, toured, lectured, and led 400 plus workshops and trainings. That's a lot.
Yeah.
You travel a lot through US, UK, and Mexico, and Europe, and you've
Mm-hmm.
trained many of the top pre and perinatal leaders, authors, teachers, and baby practitioners. And your courses are being taught all over the UK and Europe. One of the things that I've learned a bit about from you that really inspired me to want to have this interview time with you is that you teach about pre and perinatal consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
baby body language, somato-magnetism,
Mm-hmm.
birth mask reveal method,
Mm-hmm.
and I know you're the co-founder of IPPE Institute for Pre and Perinatal Education.
Yeah.
And
Hippie.
you've been the
It rhymed
recipient.
with hippie. That's why we landed on it.
What? Why? You say?
It rhymed with hippie.
Hippie. Perfect. I can relate. Recipient of the David Chamberlain Award 2023. I didn't know that till I read this the other day. Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
World advocate for the safety, health, and well-being of the unborn and the born child. And you are also the author of a beautiful, beautiful book called New Parenting Can Change Your World. It's been nominated for Book of the Year 2022 in the Pre-natal Sciences of Congress. So I got to spend some beautiful time with your book while you were also putting it together and shaping it.
Yeah, you've been around, haven't you?
Yeah.
During the formation of it.
Yeah, which has been really special actually to be part of you deciding what was most important to share of all the things you could share and all the different directions you could go.
Yeah.
What I most would like to hear is what you feel is the purpose and the reason behind why you dedicated your life to working with babies, pre and perinatal.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure. I mean, I certainly never planned on it. And a lot of us who end up in this field had really rough births and prenatal lives, and so we're motivated to save the world from some of the terrible things that we had to endure. And I just always had a knack for seeing a lot And even in junior high and elementary school, people would come to me with their problems and we'd sit down and talk about them. And I got accused of analyzing everything and everybody all the time, but it's not analytic, Terra. What I do isn't analysis. I've learned how to see the truth. And it's everywhere all the time, but our culture has learned how to unsee a lot of these truths for many reasons. They're painful to look at. When we see something that has hurt someone else, like a scar or something, actually the same parts of the brain light up as if we were getting hurt ourselves when we see something like that. So although we're really can be rubbernecking and curious if there's an accident on the highway, if we get close and the actual, horrible visual scene is there, well, that's when we look away most of the time. We don't want to see real trauma. And so our culture has just figured out, how to not see what happens to everybody. If we see something in someone else, often it activates our rescuer. So we feel, I have to do something for this person. I don't even know them, but they've been wounded. If we see trauma in someone's body or face, you think about how, when you see someone who's really hurt and they're right in front of you, how uncomfortable that makes you feel. And part of you wants to help, and part of you doesn't want to get involved. And a lot of people just, I'm out of here, they just disappear. And this is what our babies endure. They endure their injuries.
I'm going to lift your microphone because I want to make sure we can hear every word.
Sure.
You got it?
Should I tighten it maybe?
Yeah, let me help you with that.
Our babies endure their birth injuries being pretty much ignored.
In truth, when I met you and you first started talking to me about your work, I really didn't understand that perspective until we dove deeper into it, which is why I wanted to talk about it. Because
thank you.
Yeah, because I realize if I've been numb to that to some degree, given all the work I do with people and the empathy I like to bring to my life, then I bet there are a lot of people out there that aren't aware of how unconscious they become to this.
It's so sad. I mean, you live a life of compassion.
Well, I choose to be around people and be as empathetic as I can be, for sure.
But you're also just a naturally compassionate person.
True.
So, like, I can tell when you're being professionally compassionate with me, which is really great. But I can also feel your true heartfelt compassion for me and others. And so you think, God, if even Terra doesn't quite see what's going on with a baby, how do we get sort of the general public to understand?
Yeah.
Oh my God, it's such an uphill battle.
Sure.
Even people in my own world, my colleagues who are pre and perinatal scientists themselves can be what I call birth trauma deniers. I get this question asked a lot.
Yeah.
And here it is. It's, do we all have birth trauma? And I mean, I've never met anybody who didn't.
Right. One thing that we discussed in the past was being reminded that there's a lot of pressure that becomes absolutely necessary for part of that transition to occur. And yet, well, depending on the circumstances, for some it's a lot more than others. Yeah.
I'm not saying all of birth is traumatic every time for everybody. That's just not true. And there are levels of trauma, of course. I mean, there's severe trauma where you need to take immediate action to save a life or disfigurement or something like that.
Right.
But I think when someone is injured and they've had a lack of oxygen, or their bones have been displaced on their face, or their muscles are contracted and in spasm, that's hurts too. And so I include that in my definition of trauma.
Right.
It's like if I got hit in the head once by Mike Tyson, that would be traumatic for me, and I might see stars.
Yeah.
Well, birth is like that. Our human beings have to rotate our heads to get through the narrowest part of birth. We're the only mammals who have to do that, the only ones. You see a horse get born and they're walking around, and an hour later, looking at the world and alert. They don't have head trauma. They're also born full term. Human beings, because our heads are so big, we get born while we're still prenatal,
Huh.
We got to get out of there while we still can.
Right.
Because our big brains hold big craniums, which are passing through narrow pelvises. And we have narrow pelvises because we walk with bipedal steps rather than on all fours.
Mm-hmm.
Like, have you ever seen a chimp? How they walk?
Yeah.
They swing those big,
Sleigh.
Those are birth-friendly hips, let me tell you. Chimps born and they're like, grab onto their mom and go, let's go,
Uh-huh.
And we're basically prenatal for another year at least. So that's why it's so good to wear babies. But getting back to the main thing, I have been so frustrated just trying to get people to take a peek at what happens to our babies, and it's hard to get them to do that. So I tried to slip it into my book in a way that wasn't too pushy, and in a way that wasn't too graphic.
And that said, the book itself, New Parenting Can Change Your World, more wisdom, less stress, including the cure for colic. So one of the ways that you can have that conversation is through the fact that colic is so common, perhaps. And it gets people's interest because they're suffering and not knowing what to do with their child.
Oh, moms have dads go through so much.
Yeah.
You know what it's like.
Yeah.
My God, it changes you forever.
Absolutely.
There's nothing more stressful than having a new baby and trying to live with it after giving birth. Is there?
I don't think so. That said, so many of the things that have been written about it, from what I've read, talk about how to fix or change things, or how to manipulate things in certain ways, as if the baby's doing something wrong, or is at least what I've read, because I was doing research on it. And it's what I was reading in your book that was so thoughtful was the consideration that this baby has gone through so much.
Yeah.
And we have to remember maybe how to have a different perspective on empathy, how to work with it.
It's like, I don't know if we can remember it. I think it's more like we have to have the courage to see the truth.
Yeah.
And it's not easy, so it's a lot easier to blow it off, and that's what most people do. Even well-meaning parents who want to love their children and get to know them better won't quite let it all in, what their babies have been through, so their babies keep crying. Colic is a word that I'm going to change, if I can, with my career, hopefully before I die, because it's a word that misleads people immensely. If you read about the definition of colic, it's like persistent, unexplained crying.
Right.
But when people think of colic, they're like, oh, there's a stomach problem, or there's acid reflux, or we could give a pill, we could give a tummy massage, we can give my baby looks like his stomach hurts. Well, babies cry from what are called implicit memories, which are places in the body where things still hurt. And it looks like they might have a tummy ache, but it's not. And colic is not about tummy problems. That shouldn't even be called colic. Persistent, unexplained crying is now explained. It comes from places in the body where babies still hold painful experiences physically. And glued to that physical place are bits of a very powerful emotional content. And so these memories are very deep in the body itself. They're not explicit memories. Baby doesn't go, oh man, it really hurt when I was trying to turn my head, my mom's pelvis at 2:15 in the morning when they gave her medication, and she stopped feeling pain, but I was still feeling pain. Man, that was terrible. No, Babies don't remember it that way, but they remember that moment because of what happens in their body and the way their little heads get crunched. And they pull on their ears or rub their eyes or do whatever with these body movements that are so intriguing. And they tell us what's going on inside the baby if we listen. So if we listen to the crying and see what the baby body language is, it gives us a chance to know what's going on for them. That's the way of asking.
When we met early on, I remember you describing to me ways to consider. Oh, let me help you with that first.
Okay, thanks.
Got top heavy somehow. There we go. Let's see if that'll. There we go.
Thanks, Terra.
So, one of the things you described to me is how you can see the formations of the face that have continued to demonstrate what happened at birth.
Yeah.
You know, looking at faces of people who were figures back in time. And I remember you've had that in some of your newsletters.
Yeah.
Or looking at babies that have gone through various things and then being able to describe what that birth process did to them, to their skull, or to their nose. Or,
yeah. It's written on the face what happened to us in birth. So we're the only mammals who have to turn our heads to squeeze through because it's so tight. We're the only mammals whose mothers get exogenous or artificial medications and opiates and things to mediate the pain during the birth. And kind of a sad thing happens, and I'm not against medications, I'm not against anything really, there's some things I'm against, but we tend to throw a lot of medicine at birth that doesn't need to be there. And including interventions with Pitocin and medications and so forth that all have a psychological influence on that baby and his or her life. So when a baby is given a decision under great pressure, do I turn this way or do I turn that way? And I feel a lot of pain. If the mother is also given that decision, well, she's, oh man, it hurts here, and mom's trying to move around, and the baby's trying to move around, they're doing that together. They're mutually navigating this incredible process. This is a person's emergence into the world, it's life coming. And so this is also when pain meds are usually offered. The nurse will say, oh, you look like you're in pain, boom, it could be in your system in 10 seconds. So medications tend to be offered during this most painful part of birth or asked for during this time. And, epidurals even have an impact because the struggle that the mom and baby are having together, boom, when there's a medication given, the mother takes one route and the baby takes another route. It's usually even made harder because the mom is no longer looking for an optimal position. She doesn't feel it. So the baby gets crunched even more and is alone now and can even maybe wonder, what happened? I thought we were in this together. Where'd you go? And this isn't random thinking or estimating or guessing. This is something I've seen over and over and over again in adult clients doing research, exploring their own implicit memories and working with babies and helping babies heal from it. So you see the efficacy of treating it by knowing what it is. So it's... And
what are some ways of treating that you can talk about a little bit?
Well, let's name a birth malady, and we can talk about that because there are dozens of them and dozens of ways of treating them.
Sure.
This is the beauty of this work, is if you let yourself see it, and you let yourself know what happened, and you let yourself know where it came from, already that is called accurate empathy.
Mm.
So if I really get that, oh, Terra, you've got a cold kind of, and whoa, it looks like you got some bronchitis, and maybe something's been dripping down into your throat, and it might even getting to be congested in your upper right lobe of your lung right there. Wow, so I know right there where something's going on for you.
Mm.
How does it feel when I recognize it?
Comforting.
Isn't it?
Yeah.
We just want to be seen.
Yeah.
Babies are always like, look at me, little kids, look at what
me.
I can do.
Yeah.
And babies are crying out to be seen, because just getting seen with where you're at is comforting.
Mm-hmm.
And it rings that old bell, that Swedish proverb, a malady, a wound, when shared, is halved.
Mm.
So it's true, babies aren't carrying it all themselves anymore. That's one of the biggest things, is just to recognize it.
Yeah.
I'm not alone anymore.
Yeah. So that's something I think it sounds like something to apply to healing in general, that really seeing.
Yeah. Accurate empathy.
Accurate empathy. It's a wonderful way to describe that. Accurate empathy.
Yeah, I came up with that word. I was so proud of it, and then I found out somebody else had been using it for decades.
Damn.
So it's fine. I'm glad it's there, I also was going for perceptive compassion. So I was, when you're a pioneer, you get to name a lot of things, but it's really embarrassing when you find out you're not a pioneer about something. You just crossed over someone else's path that they've been working on for, generation. But I love words like accurate empathy and baby body language. I decided to trademark it because when I started using it 30 years ago, it got out, and a lot of people were saying they study baby body language, but it's nothing like what I do or what I was teaching. And even some of my own students say, I do baby body language, and some of it's like what I do and some of it's not like what I do. So I trademarked KTBT, baby body language. And I want to find a way, a friend of mine, Matthew Appleton, who wrote a wonderful book I wrote the foreword to, in the back of his book, he actually has pictures of body language as an adult doing different kinds of baby body language. But babies do very typical things that tell you what's going on with them.
Mm.
And
can you describe anything?
I'm
sure again it's...
Yeah, let me show you. I'll show you some baby body language. And this is funny because this is one we all know, and we all have a comment about it. Baby goes like this.
Rubs her eyes.
And you say, "Oh, baby's sleepy."
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's true, but the understanding of it is mixed up. It's funny. I'll tell you why. When a baby is in its social mind, and even young babies have a social mind. They look around and they're seeing things. They might see an eye. They might see a flower. They're not even maybe able to reach yet. They might hear the dog. That's their social function, and their prenatal frontal cortex is at work. Their social brain is at work.
Mm-hmm.
But if they get tired, what happens is the underlying parts of the psyche start to feel the wall get thinner between the social world and our inner psychic world.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I get sleepy as a baby, what happens is my hands just go to my eyes. I don't plan it. I'm not a baby like, it's 6:15. Now I'm going to put my hands up to my eyes, rub them 6 times, and look sleepy, and then put them down, None of that is planned. The body does it.
Mm-hmm.
The body does it. Or pulling on an ear. I've looked up YouTube ear pulling, and there were like 30 moms like, is your baby pulling on her ear all the time? What's that all about? We know what it's about. They're trying to straighten out a crumpled tentorium membrane from birth. I'll explain about that later. But all of these things, hair pulling, scratching a part of the face, eye rubbing, ear pulling, all of that are forms of baby body language about stuff that's happened to the face, okay?
through the birth process.
Yeah, because it's the face that takes the impact.
Sure.
You'd think, back here, the occiput leads, right? There's only one bone back here. Big one.
Yeah.
There's two big ones here. From here on down, there are 14 bones.
In the front of the face.
42 muscles. Who knows how many tendons and ligaments?
Yeah.
It's all very thin, partially ossified bones. It's like a jigsaw puzzle that's really thin and moist, right? And when that gets compressed and the baby gets through the birth canal, your face gets rearranged at birth. Everybody's does.
If you had to guess how many babies probably come out with a broken nose that isn't defined as a broken nose by any doctor, right? But what do you think the percentage might be?
I know the percentage.
Okay.
I mean, pediatric percentages range from 20 to 30%. And for it to reach the standard of a broken nose, according to a pediatric doctor, you have to have a broken nose. that is way off. But my criteria is finer, and I think a little more respectful to the baby, because we have all these sutures that we have between our different bones. And can you hold this for a sec? And so we have all these sutures between the frontal bone and the nasal bone, like this. They're tiny little sutures. But if one of those breaks during birth, is that a broken bone?
Sure.
My criteria is.
Yeah.
So, pediatricians statistically report broken noses are the main fractures. Also collarbones are second, I think. They happen in 20 to 30% of births. By my criteria, it's much, much higher. And
then there's no discussion about strains or, ligament tears, tendons.
Degrees. I know, it's just a little shear.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you, and I guarantee you if you're looking in this camera or that one, go look at your nose, and you will probably find that it wanders and strays a little bit from one direction to the other.
Yeah.
Yours does.
Mine quite a bit, actually.
Everybody's does, right?
Yeah,
and I'll show you what that's from. I just happen to have some toys here. Can you hold that? That's a pelvis.
I'm going to remind you that some people don't see the video. They're only going to hear the audio.
Okay, so Terra's holding a pelvis and I'm holding a sock. And this sock represents this part of the pelvis. And the part I'm describing is where the lumbar L5 meets the sacrum S1, and there's a bulge here. See that? That's called the LSP, lumbosacral promontory. And this is my LSP that I use for demo purposes. It's a pair of socks. Okay? So let's say I'm a right-sided lie. I'm lying like this in my mom's womb, and it's time for me to be born, and I start to get pushed down, and oops, I can't keep going. I gotta turn. I'm stuck. All of us get stuck here. So which way do I turn, Terra? Well, the tendency is want to turn down. No matter what side of eye you are, it's a tendency to want to turn down and go in. But look what happens on my nose if I turn over the LSP. So I can't get through. Contractions are pushing me down and out. Compression forces are pushing this whole area closer to the midline of my face, and it's dragging that eye down. And if I turn like that, I'm going to get a bone much bigger than my little bones, pushing against my little bones.
Yeah.
This bone is 30 millimeters thick, and it's a hard, dense, heavy bone. This bone in the baby, this bone right here,
in the nose,
is
the cartilage.
1 millimeter thick.
Yeah.
Like a napkin.
Yeah.
And when you turn, it hurts. And it breaks little things. And so when you come out, you're like, and if a baby puts their hand to a spot on their face or to their ear, it's not a plan. This is what I call somato-magnetism. This is body somato-magnetism. It's like a magnet So they draw each other to point out where on their body they got hurt. And they're always telling us this. And we're always going, shh, settle down, it's okay, nothing's wrong, right? Oh, honey, nothing's wrong. It's such a sweet intention. Shh, 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 nothing's wrong. But what's happening is someone's saying, Mom, I broke my nose twice when I was trying to turn, and you're telling me not to share it. Whoa, whoops, what's wrong there? It's a bummer, you know. I don't want to shame moms. They've got more than enough to do. Are crows coming? I guess not.
Not today.
So, baby body language and somato-magnetism are happening all day, every day with all babies everywhere.
It makes me consider newborns too that are put into these loud and bright, not just out of birth in the hospitals, but also, you know, newborns going out into the world.
In a stroller while their mom's on the phone and they're at the mall.
That's what I was thinking.
Yikes.
Yeah, and just it's something we would never do to someone if we knew the impact they had just been through. You know, if you had someone who had just survived a car accident or some severe injury, we would treat it so differently around them.
We're much more respectful to adults than we are to babies.
Well said, and I'm getting that. I'm getting that from this.
Yeah. When you hear the words birth hurts, nobody thinks about the baby, so they think about the mother.
True. Yeah.
And she has these big, dense bones. She knows what's happening. Babies don't. She probably has, hopefully, a partner with her that's like supporting her, or maybe a doctor or a midwife, and maybe some music and candles, and she's prepared and thought about it. Not the little one. They don't know what's happening unless you've been talking to them about it, which I encourage.
You do.
Oh God, yeah. Talk to your baby, especially about birth. Yeah, they hear you. I'm not saying they can understand words, but they can feel your words.
Yeah, there's a transmission.
Well, there's not only a transmission, there is literally a biochemical communication.
Right, yeah.
Because the biochemistry of feelings, and now even thoughts and ideas are, you know, if I have a really intense thought, you'll know it, right?
Yeah.
And I might not even change my facial expression. But I'm really, really, really scared. They sit down next to you, you will feel that. That quality of my fear. Yeah. Because you have receptor sites all over all your cells that receive the same bioinformation molecules that I'm creating a plethora of in the moment I'm super scared. This is one reason, you know, mamas get the blues, postpartum blues, because their babies crying and suffering and expressing their, it really hurts here, this was really hard for me, that it produces loads of neuropeptides and stress hormones.
I was just going to say, all the stress hormones from that.
Yeah, and they actually float out of the body, there's so many of them. It's called extracorporeal peptide reaching. So it goes out of my body, these feelings of mine, and they're looking for places to hook onto, and you've got plenty of surfaces for my extracorporeal peptides to hook onto.
You know, as you said that, what came to my mind, it was research I'd read years back about how there are so many divorces now, right? And the majority of them happen when a child is within 2 years of age. From birth to 2 years.
I believe it.
And
Such a stressful time.
Well, and it makes sense from what you're even describing, right? With trying to figure out mentally, a lot of times people are trying to figure out, you know, what's going on on a layer that's maybe a very different layer than what
and
we're
you feel
describing.
entitled to blame someone else because you know it's not you.
Right.
You'll figure that one out.
Or it's just so painful or devastating, but there's this level of of the conversation is not the mainstream conversation. Like I'm feeling the pain of my baby from the birth. That you know, how often is that the conversation?
I know, and I don't know it.
Yeah.
I don't know it, and I don't know what to do about it, and I'm hopeless and helpless, so it gets even worse.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, that's why I always feel happy when I'm around you, because you're joyful and you're always emitting joyful neuropeptides. Thank you for that. Appreciate it. Terra's in the room.
Sweet. Well, and as you say that, I'm considering babies and how it seems to be often a goal of adults to get babies to laugh or make a sweet sound, right?
Oh, they want to change the subject.
Right.
They're rescuing themselves, not the
Right.
baby.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
When the baby cries, you don't want to hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because God made babies' cries the most irritating, annoying thing you can hear.
Yeah.
Right? On
Truly.
purpose. Because when you hear it, you have to do something.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to go rescue someone or feed them. So Emerson came up with this great checklist. If a baby needs something, its needs go under the normal mother and father checklist. Food.
Mm-hmm.
So my baby need to burp.
Mm-hmm.
Because they do.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really uncomfortable until they do. And life is crazy and miserable when you finally, as parents, figure out that burping works.
Mm-hmm.
What
Yeah.
a relief.
Yeah.
Dirty diapers, a rash, and maybe my baby cold.
Yeah.
And my baby just exhausted and can't fall asleep and needs a little yummy, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all needs.
Mm-hmm.
So all babies have those needs. And it's a pity when those needs aren't met. It's actually, I think, traumatic when those needs aren't met.
What are some of the somatic, body touch-oriented ways that you can support? I mean, I'm hearing that there's hormones, neuropeptides, there's energetic, there's frequency, there's sound, but I'm curious on a somatic body level, other ways that you would describe kind of working with the healing of that understanding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, having a baby know, I hear you, I'm present with you, and what you might have gone through.
And this needs stuff I was talking about leads right into that.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's what happens. Most parents go down their needs checklist. They've taken care of everything. My baby's had a nap, can't be tired, just woke up. Why is my baby still crying? And then I have to look at my baby and wonder, you know. The thing is, when you see what your baby's crying about, they're usually crying about the same thing all the time. The main thing that's bothering them.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes there are 2 or 3 things bothering them, but the prominent problem is usually when they cry about most.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can hear that, if you can identify that, that's the first step, like I was saying. That's sharing, compassionately sharing what their pain is.
Mm-hmm.
The next thing is, like, if say they're pulling on this ear.
Mm-hmm. Pulling on the right ear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you look down and you realize, wow, the right eye is actually smaller on my baby than the left eye. Well, look at your babies, one eye's smaller, one eye's larger. On makeup channels, I was trying to figure out some research once about eye size and smaller and larger, and I Googled something and I ended up on a makeup page that said, here's how to make both eyes look the same size. And then I went on to read and it said, usually one of your eyes is larger than the other one, and that eye is usually higher. And they went on, you know, to actually describe what happens to the eyes during a normal vaginal birth rotation. Isn't that funny? And how to fix it with makeup so they look the same. But if you can tell which eye on your baby is smaller, that's probably the eye that had the most compression against it from bones.
Okay.
And those bones push in deep.
Mm-hmm.
And they affect the baby while the baby's trying to turn. So there's a lot of pain that comes when our babies are trying to turn.
Mm-hmm.
And wow, just imagine all the little tiny bones inside here.
Mm-hmm.
Pieces of bones. You know, the ethmoid and sphenoid, and all these bones also have little parts of themselves, sometimes little honeycomb cells that get crunched and leak blood. Sometimes babies have this blue mark
Across the nose,
across
the bridge.
top. It's called a sugar bug. It lasts for months. It's just leaking marrow from a little crunch. It's not a vein. Pediatricians would call it a vein, but the vein's down here. It's actually broken little sutures that leak. It's called a sugar bug. That's a cute name. But to answer your question, I can look at my baby and just say, okay, so there's more here than I realize. What have you been through? What have you been through, honey? What's going on? I'm really able to see, even though it might be scary and hard, I'm going to listen to you, honey. Your baby will go nuts. It'll just tell you everything it wants to. Finally!
You're here!
And get ready, Your baby will start crying and you may need to calm yourselves down, both of you. But one thing you can do is just say, these are so important. They seem so simple. Oh my God, it looks like you got hurt in there. And you look. Like if I, watch this, it looks like you got hurt in there. And I'm looking at your ear. And if I'm, oh man, it looks like you got hurt in there. And I'm actually looking at your medial rectus muscle, which is actually in your eyes slightly hypertonic because of your birth. So you can feel me looking in there.
Yeah. Right.
Just send love in there and awareness. It's like shining a light. Jung said, you don't get enlightened by sitting under the sun and worshiping light. You get enlightened by shining a light into the dark places. Well, that's what you want to do with your baby. You want to say,
and you have to be willing to see them first so you can.
what's going on in there, sweetie?
Yeah.
How are you doing? What happened to you? Oh, babies love it. They might burst out crying and you might regret that, I started them crying again, but this is a crying where they can release their pain underneath what happened.
The relief. Yeah.
So you can look, you can share the load. One last thing, now they're not alone. When they were injured, they were alone in the dark and they didn't know what was happening. Now they're in the light, they're with you. And this distance, this is the breastfeeding distance. This eye-gazing distance is the absolute perfect distance to develop the right orbital neo-frontal cortex.
What is that distance? How would you describe it if someone can't see
The
it visually?
breastfeeding distance.
The breastfeeding distance,
It's like 10 inches maybe.
Yeah.
That distance stimulates and organizes self-regulation in babies. And real quick, I see you're ready to shift here, but let me show you one last thing.
Yeah.
So even if I'm a man and I'm not breastfeeding,
That's what I was just going to
I
ask.
can hold my baby right here. I can have a bottle or not.
Yeah.
And here's what happens, and we can describe this for people who don't have a visual of it. I'm eye gazing with my baby, and babies are usually like, "You're my mom, wow!" And then they're looking for it, but then they start to get stimulated from seeing you.
Yeah.
And they want to begin to look away a little bit because their arousal level goes up. And some moms do this.
They're learning how to
pursue.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Well, they're learning how to build a charge to feel all that energy.
Yes.
Right?
Their energy builds.
Yeah.
And it gets to a level where they feel. They don't even know it. They just turn away.
Yeah.
And you don't pursue that.
Yeah. Let them turn
chasing
away.
them. You let them turn away, but you stay here.
Yeah.
And it's so cute. You stay here with soft, receptive eyes, right? Non-pursuing eyes. And eventually they'll go, hey, wait a minute, there was somebody back here. Oh, Mom, hello, you're right there waiting for me. Imagine a mom who does that over and over and over again while all these connections are being made in the right orbital neo-frontal cortex. That baby's going to have such awesome self-regulation. It will know itself. It'll know when this is too much. Anything in life. It'll know when I can engage with something and how much I can take and how much is too much. A lot of power in that.
Beautifully shared. Thank you. Because,
You're welcome.
and then I know that you also work with adults,
Sure.
who've had birth traumas or uncovered that is the level of depth of what they're working through at times in their lives. And so I wonder, have you given them exercises, or not exercises, but ritual or ways of...
All kind of things.
Yeah, right?
There's a ton.
Yeah.
So many ways to heal it if you're willing to look at it. The first step is to have the courage to say, I might be broken somewhere, I don't know where, but it might be causing all these damn problems in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And do I have the courage to look at the origin of those, of these symptoms that are acting out, whether it's in your bank account or your relationships or your way you eat.
Yeah.
And underneath all that, there's usually some early
root.
Yeah.
Yes. Can I read something from your book that really touched me?
Sure, yeah, thanks.
I'm going to just say it's on page 15, and it was so beautifully written. I want to share this. Probably the highest form of sacred activism is to enable incoming souls to retain or recover what they came with, and to remember where they came from and why they came. We were all babies once with unlimited possibilities before us. If our soul came to earth with an intention, the transition of birth and certain prenatal stages are so challenging they can make us forget our most precious qualities. Even if you don't believe there is a soul in a baby during the pregnancy, surely you must recognize that the birth transition is unparalleled in its intensity, and that the entity, the baby, her brain, her body, is shaped forever by the event. For babies and adults alike, empathy encourages human beings to move through and beyond our hardships. If we deny our pain or adapt to it, live life around it, we become trapped and we are defined by it, never escaping it. But if we grow and deepen as a consequence of negotiating with our own pain, then we can move through it. We are able to live from a place of consciousness and balance, and we are deeper and more powerful for it.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful what you wrote.
Thank you, Terra.
And I just wanted to read that whole bit.
I really appreciate it. It's an honor that you recognize the value of that. I felt like I wanted to reach the general public because everything's so messed up in our world these days, and I have two lanes I can take with this. One of them is how do we get people to just see what's there? And the way the psyche works is if people aren't seeing what's there, it finds some weird ways to shove it in your face. And as a collective culture, what's reflected back to us, the ugly things we see, hubris, greed, cheating, war, it all comes from fear of not having enough, or not being enough, or not getting enough, not being okay, not being strong enough, so I have to cheat, I have to lie, I have to make up my world to match me because I don't want to see what the world's really like. I mean, nobody says those things, but that's what gets acted out in our culture. That's what's trying to wake us up. And to me, it's basically trying to say, human beings, this is where you're headed. This is what you're going to be like if you don't have compassion for yourselves and each other. There's just no compassion anymore, except in small pockets. Real compassion. And real compassion can only come from seeing the truth. I
would dare to say I've met a bunch of people over time that wanted to have a baby so they could learn how to be more empathetic, that who had a certain understanding of themselves, that maybe they'd become a bit more self-oriented to the degree that maybe they need to learn more about how to care for others. But I would hope that if that's the case, which is beautiful in its own way, that we really consider how to hear and to see in this way that you're talking about.
Yeah, babies can. Here's the thing: it's so easy to give them what they need, but it's really kind of scary and tricky to look at the truth about what they need, because then we have to say everybody gets hurt coming into this world. Whose plan was that? You know, must have been a man who designed the pelvis. You know, I don't think we can get here without getting hurt. There's something about birth, including C-sections, which are,
I was just going to ask you about that.
well, they're very, very problematic in terms of psychological consequences in their own right. So just the general answer is I'd rather be born vaginally than be a C-section. I can talk a lot about some of the issues that we have with C-section babies and IVF babies.
If you'd mention anything, I'd love that. Just to bring that out into the conversation. I think there are a lot of people that don't wouldn't even think of something you might say.
Okay. Then I can come back to where I was going.
Sure. Yeah.
There's two kinds of C-section babies: emergency and planned. And emergency C-sections, thank God we can do them. They save lives. And doctors have all these tools, you know, extraction devices, vacuums, forceps, all of these drugs at their control. You know, they can do a C-section. It's just instantly almost. It's amazing. And it's tempting to use all those things when they're at hand. And our C-section rates are now above 30% in hospitals.
Oh, yeah. Can I just say that even though I was determined to have a natural birth, Rivers and I had different ideas of how we'd want to do that in a way that felt safe. So we agreed that no matter what, I'd end up in a hospital. And so that I was dilated, so far dilated, that there was no need for any kind of medication. It was clear it's happening.
He's coming.
It's happening.
He's
right?
here.
He's actually here. Yeah. And they still wanted to try and give me drugs, and they couldn't understand why I wouldn't want them.
Yeah.
They said, you're going to deny that option. Like, couldn't believe it. The nurses said, we don't get people in the hospitals that usually deny it.
They almost shame you into doing it.
Well, and that is what was going on, actually. There was a lot of that.
Control.
Yeah. And saying it in the name of trying to protect, maybe not. But in that moment, it seemed like they thought it was safer to do that. It seemed like they thought it was safer to give me the drugs.
Well, it's safer for them because then they can control it. They control the timing of it. They don't have to listen to you cry and scream if it takes longer. There are a lot of reasons hospitals want to control and manipulate the birth process. I don't want to be cynical, but you know, a lot of them are financial reasons. A lot of them are convenience. Some of them are necessary, but I've heard, and I'm not an expert on this, so I'm throwing out some quotes that I can't back up right now, but I'll find out. Only 5% of C-sections are medically necessary. We're up to 30%.
We're up to 30%. Yeah.
Instead of 5%.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems is that we don't teach our birth practitioners about the severity of the psychological consequences of a C-section baby, which is what started this part of our conversation. So if we go to an emergency C-section that's a true emergency, thank God. Okay? We can have a live birth, 10 fingers, 10 toes, quarters around the neck twice. There was no way to get out. Thank God. Babies who are born by emergency C-section have some very obvious psychological traits. So I'm just going to tell you the ones that are sort of self-evident. And one of them is they can get into a lot of trouble and expect someone else to get them out. Right?
Yeah. Interesting.
They also, when they get anxious, because of the way the interventions go, they often get anxious. They don't want to be touched or comforted, because what came in and got them was a knife and a huge hand. Pulls you out in 1 minute, you know. I've had adult C-sections, babies, adults who were born by C-section when they were babies say to me, I realized that I was still in there. My body was out, but part of me was still there.
Yeah.
And there are more, so I'll give you a couple more and then we can go to planned C-sections. Emergency C-section babies can tend to feel like everything is crisis all the time. Because that's what happened in their birth, and they sort of, you get a snapshot of that, and the brain constellates all that. And the brain says, aha, this is the way life is. I just came into life on Earth, this is the way it is. And this is what happens. We program our brains, our hard drive gets programmed at birth. Way more neural connections are being made around birth than at any other time of life. So everything that happens then, that's our hard drive. Think of it that way. So emergency C-sections are really hard because it creates a personality type, it can, in a person who says, I can't do it myself. And thank you for doing that for me. And underneath it, it's saying, fuck you for doing that to me. Get it?
I do.
How do you resolve that? And that resides underneath most people's awareness. So that's operating in C-section babies often. That's just a handful. So we'd like to get all of them out there, put in print, put in a curriculum, and just ask birth practitioners, you know, take 1 semester of pre and perinatal psychology. You know, if you're an OBGYN, a midwife, a doula, you know, natal nurse, whatever, just take 1 class on the consequences of interventions.
What you're describing is so key for early developmental understanding, and I'm just blown away by how you just described it so clearly. It's huge.
Yeah, people often say, well, birth's so hard, let's just give everybody C-sections.
Yeah.
Oh, please.
Yeah.
Planned C-sections.
And you were going to mention something about in vitro? Is that?
I'll get there if you want.
Yes, please.
Alrighty. Planned C-sections, you don't have a choice about when you're going to be born. Somebody else does it for you. Start your life for you. Most studies now indicate that when a baby is really ready to go and is feeling, it's getting kind of tight in here, I'm big, I'm claustrophobic, I gotta get out of here. That starts flowing around and it creates all kinds of hormones, some of them stress hormones, that signal the mom's HPA axis, and it gets the whole ball rolling with natural oxytocin. That doesn't happen when a baby's scheduled to be born at 8 o'clock on Wednesday because the hospital won't do a VBAC, for example, or my doctor won't let me do a VBAC, so I have to get another C-section, planned C-section, 8 o'clock, and let's say I'm not even talking to my baby, so I'm not going, honey, you know, we're going in together, I'm gonna get some drugs, I won't feel you, but somebody's gonna help you get out, daddy's gonna be, if you talk to your baby, it feels that all the way through the hospital visit. Such a good companion of a mother if you can talk to your baby while you're doing that. Please, moms, talk to your babies all through the pregnancy, not just if you're getting a planned C-section. So here's the thing, it's like, how do you know how to initiate something? Anything. How do you know when you're going to sit up next? Well, you will feel something inside you and you go, I need to sit up.
Mm-hmm.
Planned C-section babies have a tangled up version of knowing when to do anything because their whole program about life was done to them. Am I supposed to get up now? I'm already over here. How did I get over here? I didn't push through this birth canal and struggle with my mom and find that I could move myself and participate. I'm over there.
Would that lead to difficulty making decisions, maybe even?
Major.
It seems that way.
What program do you put in to help you decide?
Right.
It's really also about initiating projects.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
It's also about, God, just who am I? Where am I? What am I going to do?
Mm-hmm.
Help! And then you can resent that help.
Mm-hmm.
So hard. And the C-section babies can be very tactile and defensive. Their way into the world was drugs, a knife, overwhelming power, hands grabbing you, pulling you away from the direction you thought you were supposed to go, and having to comply with all that because you don't have a chance. You are taken from your mother's womb in a direction that doesn't feel right to your innate sense of humanity at the level of the soul. Changes life.
Surely.
When do I start projects? Which way do I go?
Mm-hmm.
How can I have romantic contact when touch just is so dangerous and iffy and crazy? So that's just a few of both those types of examples. And they're self-evident. So, you'd think, like, what happened to me once I was giving a lecture in Mexico City at the hospital. It was a hospital of mothers and children. Really a huge hospital that had a lot of, I think they did 15,000 births a year. And it was when we pulled up, I used to work in Mexico City a lot, and lovely people there, and I had some wonderful sponsors, and we had a radio show, and I was giving lectures in universities. And at this hospital, there were like rows of indigenous people who'd somehow taken a bus and wandered and were sitting outside in their serapes with their pregnant wives under their arms, and they were going into the big city to get a birth at a hospital because that is more prestigious than staying at home and getting a birth in their little village.
Wow.
Yeah. So you see these sweet, soulful people sitting on the sidewalk outside the hospital, and wow, it was huge. They had a huge auditorium. And I was like, where am I going to do my lecture, They're like here. And like 10 minutes later, the auditorium filled up because everybody was ordered to come to my lecture at lunch. So they had to skip lunch, come to my lecture. Huh. And all the white hair guys, all the heads were in the very last row at the top, near the door, and I was at the bottom. So I gave a lecture on the psychological consequences of C-sections because their rate of C-sections was off the charts. It was like 60% in that hospital.
Wow.
And they were just turning them out, just chucking babies out like crazy. And I just wanted to give a little wedge of awareness to what they might be doing. And I could just feel some kind of crazy tension in the room, and like I might be pushing it too far. So I just said, screw it, man, I'm just going to go for it. And just tell them everything. They can think I'm crazy, but something might sink in somewhere.
Yeah.
And and they were supposed to be there for 50 minutes. At 49 minutes, everybody in the white hairs in the back row got up and walked out. And as soon as they left, this huge burst of applause came. And I was like, what is going on here? This is so crazy. And then about, I'd say 2/3 of the people left. They had to get back to work. But the other third rushed it down to the auditorium stage. And I came and sat at the out of the stage. I was like, guys, what's going on? We have questions. And I was like, great, I answered questions. And they were like, we're going to get in trouble, but we have more questions. And it was so sweet. They had questions. I finally said, why are you guys the ones with questions? And 2 or 3 people, 2 said, I'm pregnant. And one said, my wife's going to have a baby. And they want to know for their kids whether they should have a C-section or not.
Yeah.
I realized, these are all the childbearing people who raced down to find out.
If there's another way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't know if we influenced the C-section rate, probably not. But it was just a beautiful mankind moment, where I love Mexican people so much. I was actually engaged to be married to a Mexican girl back then, and I just love them. They're sincere. They're such great parents. The dads. You would just walk down the street in Mexico City, anywhere, any pueblo somewhere, and the dad will be holding his daughter. Oh, by the way, all have pierced ears. Just smooching his daughter and taking them like this and loving them. And I used to go from Mexico to Bristol, England. And I can remember the very next morning I forgot to schedule a day off. And we came in and there was a mother and a father, and the father was carrying the baby like this.
Oh, wow.
No, like this.
Kind of
Sideways and away from him.
Yeah.
And kind of like, like he was holding something radioactive. It's just such a big difference from the Mexican daddies to the UK daddies. And
wow.
I got a lovely family of British colleagues who are making a big change in
Lovely.
Matthew and Jenny, and they've got an outfit called Conscious Embodiment Training, so they're making a difference in our world.
Wonderful. So, do you want to mention something about the in vitro as well?
Yeah. The main problem getting pregnant that faces most people is called unexplained infertility. It's not a problem with an egg or a sperm or a tube. I mean, those you can figure out and change, but it's almost always about the implantation not succeeding. I think. I mean, I haven't studied this for quite a while, but I know a lot about what I have studied and what I've taught. And the implantation process shouldn't happen. Because if you're my mother's uterus and I'm a blastocyst, and I'm like, hey, I'm hungry. I've also got the paternal genome. And you're like, who are you? You're not part of my body. We should just destroy you right now. I mean, this is where the Colic comes in. The goddess is Colic, is just right there.
You're talking about the Hindu goddess Colic.
Yeah, the goddess of death. You're not implanting here.
Yeah.
And it's still a mystery. We don't know why or how it happens.
Yeah.
And I honestly, it's been 20 years since I studied this in depth, but I studied it at the Denison Science Library in Denver, Colorado, and it was so cool because I got all the new articles and documents and schedules and research. And back then, nobody was studying it from my perspective. Back then, a lot of them were just trying to figure out how to do IVFs and start to figure out how to do that. And they actually began to look at the biochemical communication between the blastocysts and the epithelial surface of the endometrium and what's going on there. And they named it maternal embryonic crosstalk.
Interesting.
Yeah. And what the crosstalk is this blastocyst is going, I'm hungry and I'm going to die if you don't feed me. And this one's going, remind me who you are.
Yeah. Where'd
you
you
don't
come
look
from?
like me, you
Yeah.
don't talk like me, you don't walk like me. I want to let you in. maybe, I don't know. Only, like, what is it, like 60% of these guys die at this stage.
Mm-hmm.
Which probably means the 40% of us who lived almost died.
Mm-hmm.
This is where you get so hungry. You've got to eat. Look, you've been rolling down the fallopian tube,
Mm-hmm.
and you were 2 cells, then 4, then 8, then 16, then 32, then 64, then 128, then 256, and you start to get bigger and bigger. And the cells that are on the outside are rolling around along the fallopian tube, which is covered with uterine milk.
Mm.
Like, just everything you need. But pretty soon it's only the guys on the outside that are getting all the milk,
Mm-hmm.
and the inside cells start to die.
Mm.
So at some point, the blastocyst literally has a higher percentage of cells that are dying than that are going to be able to live by this method of rolling along and sponging up uterine milk. And then what do we do? I mean, this is where all of our mythologies come from.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you have to find a home. You have to establish a colony. You have to create a farm. You have to drill a well. You have to get blood.
Mm-hmm. You
have to find a way to suck blood or you're going to die.
Mm-hmm.
How does all this happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is a miracle bigger miracle than birth, actually, right?
Mm-hmm.
For me it is, because you transmogrify from a rolling gypsy who's plucking apples and eating fields and berries. You lose all of your skin and covering, get completely naked, and fall into this huge womb. Huge. And you can actually navigate.
Mm-hmm.
Most people don't realize this, but blastocysts can navigate. Isn't that cool? You wander around looking for a place to get blood.
Wow.
The way you do it is in front of you, there are different types of adenosine. I'll just tell you the short version. In front of you, wherever you want to go, you lay down a chemical that causes muscles to relax.
Mm-hmm.
And behind you, you squeeze out stuff that causes them to contract.
Mm-hmm.
So you create this wave, and you can roll around like a tank in there.
Mm.
Isn't that cool?
It is.
Yeah, a guy named Wicklund studied this and published on it. It's the implantation journey.
Oh, I just realized something. I hope this is working now. So give me 1 second.
Sure.
Yep, it is. Just had to be sure. Ah.
So I just thought it was amazing that at that early, this ball of consciousness is looking around.
Hmm.
It's called the implantation journey.
Hmm.
And 60% of human blastocysts don't make it into the implantation.
Okay.
And what I'm saying is, I don't think you ever really got this the first time. That means the 40% of us who do probably know what it's like to almost die and starve.
Uh-huh.
And when you say, oh, I'm starving, I'm so hungry, I feel like I'm dying. We know that in our cells somehow. And it shouldn't happen. And when it does, we finally have a taste of a possibility for life dependent on another being, and we drink their blood like a vampire does. This is where most pregnancies fail. This is where IVF pregnancies try to make a difference. It's in the implantation stage. It's one of their biggest areas of attention and concern. And, so they do everything they can to up their chances. They put in multiple blastocysts, right?
Mm-hmm.
They do other assisted reproduction techniques, like they'll they'll take a couple of blastocysts and then they'll take a laser and slit the zona pellucida with that laser so that the cells that are inside can pour out and implant. Sometimes those lasers kill a few cells or kill the whole blastocyst. And, then maybe just one of them implants. The thing about IVFs is this: the more vulnerable you are, the more intense interventions are on your system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like if you're
I've seen it.
okay.
So many women who had such a hard time recovering from the process.
Oh, and so you give your body over to it, you take chemicals to get extra eggs, and it doesn't work that often. I mean, there are alternative methods that have equivalent success rates, What we do is we work with implantation. Just a quick aside, I've been asked to work with IVFs from the beginning because those were often babies that had some very strange maladies.
Like?
Different than other babies. And so I started working with IVF babies years ago. And sometimes when the mother comes to me and she's so curious and loving and wants to know about her IVF babies and what can we do to help them and how can we help them really feel at home. I've had moms get pregnant while they're working with us, just naturally. So I know it can happen without all of this inventory, all these laboratory processes that are so expensive. And then it's the whole thing about why do you want to get pregnant and what does it mean to you, and are you not a whole person if you can't get pregnant, and how can you be a mom if you can't get pregnant, and there's all these other emotional psychological processes that the parents have to go through, so the whole thing's tied up with a lot. But what I know is that interventions upon more vulnerable levels of human beings go in much deeper and are much more serious. So if you get injured when you're very young, the injury goes in deeper than when you're older and more defended and stronger and so forth. And that happens even at a cellular level. So look what happens at a cellular level. Let's start with the eggs. We get clomiphene and the eggs are produced, like multiple eggs are produced. So the eggs themselves are pushed out of the ovary. And there's actually a body language that I've identified with that moment. And so I can sometimes spot a baby who was born with reproductive drugs that produce more cells more egg cells at ovulation. There's a certain posture they take that you can see. And once I realized, I was like, I know that the mother has taken something, and sometimes she hasn't told her husband. So if he's there, I can't just say, "Oh, you took da-da-da-da, didn't you?" It's tricky. And so I teach my baby therapists how to recognize that, and then how to work with it with the parent. Usually you try to let them describe it, and I would, for example, if I saw that, I would go, so how was it for you? Did you guys do any, fertility assistance in getting eggs at any point in time? And often they're like, oh yeah, I took da-da-da-da-da, and they harvested 7, and, so then I know, okay. But what's happened is the stuff gets in early and it stays with all the sister cells. When something huge happens to a cell, it has memory of that.
Sure.
So when that cell divides into 2, its memory doesn't disappear. And when you look at ICSI births, for example, do you know about an ICSI? It's intracellular sperm injection. It's when they take a whole sperm and stick in a needle and squeeze the sperm deep into the inner cell of an egg, tail and all, unlike how it normally happens. So the is just like shocked. It hasn't gone through its normal process. It has a tail. It's swimming around in a place where it shouldn't be swimming around. It shouldn't have a tail. Well, that egg has been punctured so deeply. You've seen pictures of it?
I haven't, but I know we've talked about this before.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's tense. And it leaves a trace in the cell and in all the daughter cells. And you could often see someone who's been fertilized via ICSI injection, by certain gestures they make, by certain things they do with their eyes. It's amazing. You can learn how to read this stuff by studying Pre and Peri-natal Sciences.
Amazing.
It's not magic, it's just, it shows.
Learning what to recognize. Yeah.
Sperm gets centrifuge
Spinned. Yeah.
to get the fat ones.
Yeah.
And I guess, but I can often, I can look in the Santa Barbara Mall 2 blocks down and see a kid who's been from a centrifuge sperm because of the way they move.
Wow.
And they're out of control, and they're dizzy, and they're wild, and they don't stop, and their parents don't hold still. I am holding still, and they're still spinning. These things go in deep. I've worked with guys who are frozen, thawed, and refrozen, and then implanted.
Whoa.
And this one kid, his lips were cherry red, like it was just so funny that like he was still cold and standing outside in a Christmas movie or something with these red lips.
Wow.
So many huge interventions that cause global influence on the being at that level. And so we get a lot of IVF babies whose parents are struggling. They didn't exactly get the ball of joy they were hoping for. Sometimes it's fine, they got their little miracle, they're totally delighted and happy, they just want to do normal baby therapy, it's fine. But I've seen some very strange things with IVF babies. And there are certain diseases that IVF babies are more prone to getting, and they're much more likely to have ADHD or be delayed. The percentages are all there, you can read about it. But someone really, 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 really wants to have a baby and they can't, and they don't want to adopt. Before they get to the stage of IVF, I would hope they would consider a few sessions with a pre and perinatal scientist or pre and perinatal practitioner just to do some meditations around their womb. Because where the womb is not letting in a baby, IVF doesn't help. I mean, I know people have done 5 IVFs to finally get pregnant. 5. Yeah, that's expensive, and you go through all these ordeals, and it all comes down to humanity and longing, and I think compassion is going to change all of this. I have compassion for a mom who can't get pregnant.
Of course.
And who has an IVF baby, and then sometimes the IVF baby turns out to be a really tricky baby. I have a lot of compassion for her.
Absolutely.
And I wish what we knew was mainstream. That's the problem. That's why I want my book to get out there, because if more people read it, it's right what your mom said. It's not just about helping babies, it's about how to change the world by just giving babies what they so obviously long for and need and show us. They're my boss. And you know where they are right now. They're not here yet, but they're right here. There are babies getting born right now. There goes one. There goes one. You know, there's a bunch of them hovering, waiting to get conceived. There's come from somewhere, I think. Those guys are our boss. If we treat them, if we listen to them, they'll come save the world. We just have to give them compassion and love, and they'll know what to do. We won't have all of these crazy psychological things getting reflected back at us through a culture that hasn't been dealt with or perceived compassionately.
I don't know what to say at the end of that, because what else is there to say?
Please help us, people. Love our babies. That's all it is. It's love and understand them. There's nothing to be afraid of. If you don't look at it, it doesn't make it go away.
Right.
If you don't see the true pain, it lingers. And babies don't let it go. They'll keep crying. They'll keep asking for help. They'll keep saying, you know, I need you. I need you. I need you to see this. And when you see it, oh my God. Terra, moms get to know their babies like, it's like a window opens. The baby becomes double who they are. Moms love it. Dads love it. So, yeah, it's about compassion.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I'm glad we had
We finally did it.
We finally did it. If somebody wants to find you, how can they find you?
Just Google me.
Google your name, Karlton Terry.
Karlton Terry, yeah.
Karlton
I have a
Terry.
website. This really needs work, of course. Everybody's does, I guess. But we have a website. We have courses we teach. We have a lot of affiliates that we love and nurture and cooperate with. And I do sessions with people. I do individual sessions with babies and parents. I do this new thing called BMRs that you know about.
Fabulous.
You just Google me and come to my website and look at some of our videos and get on our newsletter list. I think our newsletters are, I didn't ever read newsletters, but when I could get mine, I'm like, oh, wow. This is going to be good. Yeah.
Thank you, Karlton.
You're welcome, Terra.
And thanks for inviting me into your home to do it.
Yeah.
We're in your home today.
Welcome. I'm so glad you came here.
Hey friend, thank you for meeting with me and my guests. Go to terrawellness.com to join my newsletter and find out what else I'm offering. Please like and follow this podcast. Check out the Terra Gold Wellness video version on YouTube and follow me at Terra Gold Wellness on Instagram and TikTok. Let's keep meeting at home. Home is where the heart